Translator Nintails. Editor Fish Creek. Chin Moo's heart thundered like a war drum as he reached back and drew down the pig-slaughtering knife strapped to his spine. Never before had he met such a presence. Mu Beifang's manner pressed upon him like a formless mountain. From the instant this elder stepped into the village, every gesture, every syllable, had cast an immense weight over all who stood here. The clash with Senior Brother Q had been forced upon him. He had had no choice but to strike back, yet the bearing before him now still made a chill creep into his bones. What am I still afraid of when I already peed on the stone statues in the village? I've already seen monsters like Woman Wu and the Devil in Doom's Suppression Palace. If I wasn't scared, then why am I scared now? No matter how strong Mu Beifang is, he will never be stronger than the gods and devils. Chin Mu steadied his breath. Pressing down the panic that had surged up, he swept his gaze around, brows knitting faintly. The village was not particularly large, and counting him there were only 22 people here, standing like wooden stakes. The places where everyone stood were different and scattered at random, filling the whole village. The village chief lay upon his stretcher while Apothecary stood beside him. Butcher braced his upper body against a wooden pile, while Old Ma leaned upon another. Granny C carried her basket. Mute stood before his workshop. Deaf gripped his writing brush that dripped with ink, and Cripple stood on one leg with the support of his crutch. The people Mu Beifang had brought had likewise paid special attention to where they stood. Their positions were all exceedingly strange, making it difficult for anyone to move swiftly within the village, let alone to fight. This kind of circumstance demanded the utmost precision in using Qi to command a sword. If one were to use Qi to command a sword, one had to be careful, to be exquisitely exact, lest the sword's path be disturbed by colliding with others. Blade techniques from the Battle Technique faction could not attain this, and thus Chin Mu, who had cultivated Butcher's pig-slaughtering knife skill, was unable to do it. "Right here?" Chin Mu asked. Qianqiu nodded. "We'll fight right here." Chin Mu returned the pig-slaughtering knife to its sheath and revealed his bare fists. Qianqiu saw Chin Mu sheath the pig-slaughtering knife, and the glint in his eyes wavered. He had not expected Chin Mu to choose to face him empty-handed. Before Mu Beifang brought them here, they had investigated the ruins in the valley. From the remaining bones of Senior Brother Q, Mu Beifang had inferred that he had died beneath Chin Mu's knife skill. Back then, Chin Mu had picked up a wooden stick and used it as a blade to beat Senior Brother Q. On the bones, countless hair-thin cracks remained from the fierce battering. From this, he could deduce that Chin Mu's knife skill was extraordinarily intricate. Moreover, the swiftness of Chin Mu's footwork must also have been terrifying, for only thus could he keep moving without pause, striking Senior Brother Q from every direction. With Mu Beifang's exceptional ability, as one of the world's experts, he could determine from the marks left behind that Chin Mu had indeed employed battle techniques. The Battle Technique faction specialized in close combat, and possessed little to no experience in using Qi to command a sword. Thus Mu Beifang had long since set a scheme to take Chin Mu's life. Once all were within the village, the places where everyone stood would be arranged differently to lay down the Li River Aqua Dragon Formation. 9 eyes of the formation would be deliberately left, and Mu Beifang would stand upon the dragon head. Aside from Qianqiu, the rest were all experts from Li River Sect. To prevent the Li River Aqua Dragon Formation from unleashing its combined might, the villagers of Disabled Elderly Village had to block the eyes of the formation. The village chief and apothecary blocked the dragon's eyes while Blind blocked its heart. Cripple, Granny Sai, Old Ma, and Butcher stood upon the joints of the Aqua Dragon Formation's limbs. Meanwhile, Blacksmith suppressed the dragon's body while Deaf suppressed the dragon's tail. Thus was the present scene within the village. Because everyone was strewn about at random, it was extremely hard for anyone to move swiftly within the village or to use Qi to command a sword, unless one's attainments in using Qi to command a sword were unbelievably high. Clearly, Chin Mu was no such person, and his disciple, Qianqiu, was such a person. Though Qianqiu was still a spirit embryo realm practitioner, his skill in using Qi to command a sword was astonishingly high. His vital chi thread was refined to a fineness beyond compare and possessed a shocking delicacy. He had once used his chi to control a brush from 100 yards away to paint a classical portrait of a beautiful woman. Every strand of her hair within the painting was clear and distinct, not the slightest bit messy. If Qin Mu used a knife to fight him, Qin Mu was certain to lose. It exceeded Qianchu's expectations when Qin Mu sheathed his knife and accepted the challenge with empty hands. Yet no matter how one looked at it, bare fists were surely at a disadvantage against a treasure sword. Furthermore, the sword he had brought this time was no ordinary blade. It was a spirit sword, nurtured and born within a 6 directions divine treasure of a divine arts practitioner. In sharpness, durability, strength, or spirituality, a spirit sword far surpassed any common weapon. Qin Mu clasped his hands and bowed. "If you please, senior brother." Qianchu returned the salute as the treasure sword behind him began to hum. "Please, junior brother." The instant Qin Mu lifted his leg, the treasure sword behind Qianchu flew from its pouch. With his chi guiding it, the sword stabbed toward Qin Mu, spilling a cold, menacing aura. The vital chi thread was so fine that it could not be clearly seen with the naked eye. With the slightest tremor, a storm of thrusts shot at Qin Mu from countless tricky angles, dazzling in speed. For a martial cultivator to train chi-commanded swordplay to such a level was already a rare and precious accomplishment. Qin Mu's footwork was extraordinarily nimble as he threaded through the motionless figures. Yet Qianchu's sword was faster still. One would be struck dumb at the sight of such exquisite sword skill. To those who stood unmoving, the sword carried no threat at all. Yet to Qin Mu, each movement was lethally perilous. Even if Qin Mu unleashed Cripple's heaven-pilfering leg skill, he still could not evade that sword light. There were simply too many obstructions here. Every single person standing still limited his speed, and he could not release his full swiftness. Whoosh! Qin Mu's mind blazed like fire. His vital chi suddenly turned ferocious, and faintly, the roar of a dragon could be heard. Along his arm, a flame dragon seemed to coil into being. This flame dragon was indistinct, hazy. At times the dragon head merged with his fist. At other times the dragon claws blended into his palm, changing without cease. As the sword light rushed in, he met it with a punch. Just as his fist was about to clash with the spirit sword, his 5 fingers suddenly spread, and the air within his palm exploded, jolting aside the sword tip that stabbed toward him. Dang, 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 dang! Qin Mu's 5 fingers snapped out in succession, striking along the length of the sword one after another. Each flick detonated with a thunderous boom, like a massive hammer smashing down ruthlessly upon the blade. When he snapped out the 5th finger, the spirit sword had already been flung away by him, and at the same time Qianchu's vital chi thread shattered. Qin Mu quickened again, weaving into the crowd as he surged toward Qianchu. At that moment, Qianchu wore a stunned expression. Yet another sword hum rose from his pouch as a second spirit sword flew forth toward him. Qin Mu was startled and immediately retreated. A 3rd spirit sword then flew out, followed by a 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. More than 10 spirit swords drifted together in a single line, as Qianchu's vital chi thread ran through the sword handles to their tips. All the swords linked from handle to tip, spanning 20 yards in length. They were like a living silver dragon tumbling through the heavens like the churning waters of the Li River. Li River sword skills. The foremost sword skills of the southern border. Qianchu's first sword was incomparably nimble, turning in every direction. The swords behind turned with it as one, sliding through the crowd without even brushing anyone. From Qin Mu's vantage, he could only see the tip of the first sword and could not see the remainder. A powerful sense of danger rose within his heart. What he could not see meant the unknown, and the unknown meant he could not dodge, for he could not predict from where the swords would come. Li River sword skills were indeed treacherous. At this moment, the first spirit sword quivered into a blinding flurry of thrusts toward Qin Mu. Following close behind that storm of blades, the second spirit sword broke away from the line and suddenly flew toward Qin Mu's throat, guided by another independent thread of vital chi. Translator: Ninetails. Fish Creek. Qin Mu's every strand of hair stood on end. He moved like lightning, snatching at the spirit sword. only to feel a piercing agony in his palm as the blade stabbed straight in. "Moo!" Granny C could not help but cry out, yet the moment village chief shot her a glance, her words halted in her throat. Chinmu clamped down on the spirit sword, and it writhed madly within his grip, carving fresh gashes until his palm became a mangled, bloody mess. Yet his surging vital chi layered over his flesh like hidden armor, and he did not allow the spirit sword to shear his hand away. However, in the very next breath, the third spirit sword broke formation, followed by the fourth and the fifth. Qianchu's gaze flickered. The outcome had already been sealed. For Chinmu to cultivate to such a step at his age was no simple matter. But Chinmu only had 2 hands. How could he possibly catch every sword? Suddenly, Qianchu's pupils shrank. Chinmu's hands flashed in rapid succession, seizing every spirit sword by its hilt, as though he had sprouted dozens upon dozens of arms. Before the blades could even pierce Chinmu, they were already caught, each one pinned at the handle. Thunderclap 8 strikes 8th form, 1,000-armed Buddha. Qianchu's expression shifted slightly. He trembled his vital chi threads, and the spirit swords in Chinmu's hands shuddered violently, struggling to break free from his palms. At the same time, the remaining swords stabbed in like killing stars, all aimed at Chinmu's eyes and throat. Chinmu instantly locked down the hilts of 5 swords. There were still 7 swords left, streaking straight toward him. The swords hummed, spinning in mid-air like whirling tops, attempting to drill a great hole through his brain and bore down into his throat. Granny C could not bear to watch Chinmu be harmed. In that instant, Chinmu let out a thunderous roar. A thick wave of vital chi burst forth from his body, and he drew the pig-slaughtering knife from his back in a single sweeping slash. Clank! The 7 swords were cleaved apart in the same moment, falling to the ground in pieces. Such a thick vital chi thread! Qianchu was stunned. Chinmu's strike had come without warning, leaving him no chance to guard. Moreover, Chinmu's vital chi thread was absurdly thick, and the power of his blade was also terrifying beyond belief. The pig-slaughtering knife was terrifyingly sharp, sharper and tougher than spirit weapons. With Chinmu's monstrous strength added to the pig-slaughtering knife's keen edge, splitting apart Qianchu's 7 swords was effortless. Before the shock in Qianchu's heart could even fade, Chinmu suddenly flicked his wrist and hurled the 5 swords in his arms toward him. The 5 swords tore through the air at an unimaginable speed. Qianchu, however, revealed a smile and lifted his hand, firing vital chi threads toward the 5 spirit swords. At the same time, several more spirit swords shot out from his pouch once again. His sword pouch did not appear large and should not have been able to hold many swords. Yet it was strangely true that spirit swords flew out one after another without end. Yet contrary to his expectations, the moment Qianchu's vital chi threads coiled toward the 5 spirit swords flying in, his expression changed drastically. Chinmu's terrifying vital chi had been concealed within the swords, and it surged out, shattering Qianchu's vital chi threads before they could wrap around the blades. Qianchu's reaction was swift as well. He used the spirit swords that had just flown out of his pouch to block the 5 spirit swords. At the same time, Chinmu charged forward, and Qianchu immediately pointed a finger at Chinmu's back. Another spirit sword shot out toward Chinmu. A strange voice spilled from Chinmu's mouth. The sound was brief, yet it carried an indescribable temperament. Ominous, uncanny, sinister. Along with that eerie tone, the youth formed a Karana mudra and struck toward Qianchu from several yards away. Samoye! Qianchu only felt wind rush from Chinmu's palm. It seemed to contain no power at all. Just as he was about to concentrate on dealing with the 5 spirit swords, his soul suddenly flew out of his body and was sucked into Chinmu's palm, frightening him out of his wits. Thud! 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 5 heavy thuds rang out in an unbroken chain as the 5 spirit swords plunged into his body. Having lost control over the spirit swords meant to defend him, he could no longer stop the attack. The 5 spirit swords lifted his body into the air and nailed him backward. Bang! The pillar from which the butcher's shop flag hung trembled as Qianchu's corpse slammed into it, his head dangling downward. Chinmu's palm still bled. He clenched his hand with force, blood spraying out as he crushed Qianchu's souls into fragments. Devil Freedom Mudra was perfectly suited to extinguishing souls. Chinmu turned his head and smiled. Granny, I won. Granny C finally released her breath of relief, but then her anger erupted. Little rascal, you hurt your hands. I'll beat you to death later. Don't wipe your blood on your body. If the new clothes get dirtied and the stains can't be washed out, I will also beat you to death. Village Chief's gaze settled on Mu Beifeng, who sat before him, and he said, Brother Mu, your disciple has lost. Would you like to retrieve him and place him in the coffin wearing the burial clothes? Mu Beifeng raised his head and looked at Qianchu's corpse hanging from the pillar. He shook his head and replied, I'll bring his corpse back and give him a proper burial. On the contrary, this little brother here clearly possesses extremely dense cultivation, yet he used a devil voice from devil techniques. I despise such a despicable method. What he meant was the move that killed Qianchu, the devil freedom mudra. Though he had never seen such a mudra before, the voice that came from Qinmu's mouth was unmistakably a devil's voice. Therefore, what Qinmu used was certainly a devil technique. He could see that Qinmu's cultivation was dense, far denser than Qianchu's. Yet Qinmu seemed to lack true life and death experience, and thus could not fully unleash his strength. To win by relying on devil techniques was merely a cheap trick in his eyes, and thus he despised him. Village Chief's gaze wavered. He too had no idea where Qinmu had learned such a devil technique, or how he had managed to pull out his opponent's soul and kill him. The only one who walked the true devil path was Granny Sai. Could it be she who had passed this skill to Qinmu? Village Chief spoke softly. Mu'er, extinguishing a soul is a taboo, so try to use such methods less. Qinmu immediately nodded. Village Chief looked at Mu Beifeng and said, There are still 11 coffins remaining. Mu Beifeng's brows drooped as he replied, Since the coffins and burial clothes are prepared, we naturally must use them. Village Chief gestured an invitation. If you please. Mu Beifeng rose. Please. Li River Aqua Dragon formation erupted with a loud bang, and the 10 experts behind him burst forth with imposing aura, linking their aura into a single line with Mu Beifeng's. Whoosh! River water surged. Water vapor dispersed through the air. Within the tiny disabled elderly village, a long river suddenly appeared from nowhere, its waves rising to overflow the heavens. This flowing river was precisely the Li River of the southern border. Mu Beifeng and the 10 Li River sect experts stood atop this shrunken Li River. Within the river, countless swords shuttled back and forth like tiny silver fishes. Li River sect was famed for sword mastery, and their sword arts could be considered the finest in the southern border. With 10 Li River experts executing the Li River Aqua Dragon formation alongside their sect leader, Mu Beifeng, the number of flying swords they commanded was beyond imagining. Back when Granny C fought the Li River's 5 elders, the head elder Qi Yanbing had hidden 6,842 swords within his sword pellet, already a terrifying number. And now, the number of swords within the Li River Aqua Dragon formation was 10 times the number Qi Yanbing had hidden within his sword pellet. 10,000 flying swords formed the shape of a silver dragon within the water. Countless sword lights flowed and churned inside the dragon, ready to wreak havoc. It was the first time Qinmu had ever seen such a frightening sword formation, something he had not even dared to imagine before. If this formation were unleashed, it would likely raze the entire village. Village Chief still leaned upon his stretcher. Facing the terrifying sword formation before him, his expression did not change as he said softly, Blind. Blind raised his head as though he were gazing upon the mysteries of the Li River Aqua Dragon formation. Yet his eye sockets were empty. Without eyeballs, how could he see? Countless swords gave off shrill, razor screams, like a furious dragon exploding out in savage fury. They tore through the air, bringing earth-shattering pressure down upon disabled elderly village. Blind lifted his bamboo cane with one hand and pointed it toward the countless sword lights, chanting long and steady, With my dragon-slaying skill, I shall break the Li River today. Ding, a crisp collision rang out, drowning the screams of every sword. The silver dragon in midair, which looked as though it could destroy everything, suddenly stiffened. The countless swords clanged down all at once, stabbing into the ground. Blind gently lifted his bamboo cane, and the small-scaled Li River formed by the flood was actually raised by the cane before it shattered apart. The Li River could no longer hold its shape. It turned into enormous puddles that rained down from above. Blind's long chant continued as he walked forward through the water. His shoes did not touch the water's surface at all, and the bamboo cane in his hand pointed here and there. With a single poke, the brow center of one Lee River expert exploded as the cane pierced clean through his head. Another person raised a hand to block, but the bamboo cane pierced through his palm and into his chest. Blind walked from the river's beginning to its end. Behind him, corpses fell from the sky one after another, until at last he came face to face with Mu Beifeng. Their figures intertwined. Qin Mu could not see how many exchanges they had made, nor how many divine arts they had unleashed. Mu Beifeng landed upon the ground and took 2 steps forward. Meanwhile, Blind's chant had only reached the word today, of his, "I shall break the Lee River today. I know who you are, Blind. I would never have thought you would hide here, and never would have expected you to possess such strength after your eyes were destroyed." As he finished speaking, Mu Beifeng's face suddenly turned deathly pale. He sat down before village chief and requested in a soft voice, "We of the Lee River sect rely on the river to live. Our tradition is water burial, and we should not be exposed to earth. May I have your blessing?" Village chief nodded. "Don't worry, the river is right outside the village." "I can die without regrets, meeting Spear God." Mu Beifeng passed away with a smile upon his final breath. Circling behind him, Qin Mu jumped in fright when he saw a huge hole at the back of Mu Beifeng's head.